The relocation notice came through on the consortium's public channel, and I was the only one in the listening post who read it twice and understood it wasn't a relocation notice at all. I'd been seconded to the post 11 months, trauma surgeon, technically, though most days I patched burns and treated ash lung in laboris the consortium didn't bother insuring. Cinder Hollow wasn't a colony anymore so much as a debt the consortium had stopped servicing. The atmospheric scrubbers were failing. The growing domes had gone black 2 seasons back. And the Keltvaran, 6-limbed, chitan-plated, bred over 4 generations as colony builders and never once asked if they wanted to be, had kept the place running anyway, because that's what indentured stock does until someone tells it to stop. The notice said, all non-essential labora units to staging field 7 for processing, effective immediate. I'd seen consortium paperwork before. Processing never meant relocation. It meant the cull manifests, the ones that got the unprofitable labour off the books before a write-down hit a shareholder report. I commed the post's senior officer. She'd already seen it. Her voice had gone flat the way voices do right before someone makes a decision they know will end a career. Send it, she said. Send all of it. Every frequency we've got. We didn't have authority to call anyone. We sent the distress anyway. Colony in collapse. Consortium intends mass termination of indentured labour caste. No rescue requested by consortium, requesting any response. Then we waited, and the waiting was its own kind of cruelty. The consortium's culling ships don't announce a timeline. They simply arrive when the spreadsheet says arrive, and nobody on Cinder Hollow had ever once seen one turn back. I spent that hour walking the labora barracks instead of sitting at a console doing nothing, because if this was the last hour some of these people had, I wasn't going to spend it staring at a blank channel. The barracks were quiet in the way a room goes quiet when everyone already knows. Severick had the younger ones gathered near the door, plates angled toward the exit out of some old instinct that exits mattered even when there was nowhere to run to. Nobody panicked. That was the worst part. For generations of being told you don't qualify for anything teaches a species not to panic when the thing it always feared finally comes due. It teaches them to line up. 40 minutes later, something answered, and it wasn't the consortium. I was on the landing field when the first transport broke atmosphere, and I will tell you honestly, I expected one ship. A token. A diplomatic gesture that would arrive a day too late and let everyone feel they'd done something. What came was a convoy of 9, with a hospital ship riding center mass, painted white under the ashfall like it had wandered in from a different and better universe. The consortium's culling ships were already inbound from the orbital yard, 3 of them, unarmed transports retrofitted with containment holds, because that's what a cull looks like when you're doing the books instead of a war. They didn't expect resistance. Keltvaran's stock didn't fight. It wasn't bred to. The lead Earth transport didn't fire on them. It didn't need to. It simply put itself between the culling ships and the field, opened a channel, and a voice, bored, almost, the way a man sounds when he's done a hard job 100 times and doesn't need to perform the hardness anymore, said, "This field is under Terran asylum processing. Withdraw to orbit or we'll assume hostile intent." The consortium ships withdrew. Just like that. No one had told them Earth had ever filed for asylum jurisdiction anywhere near this sector. No one had told the consortium anything, because the convoy hadn't asked permission. It had simply decided the field was Earth's problem now and acted as if the matter were already settled. I watched the consortium ships hold position at the edge of orbital scan range, engines still hot, clearly waiting for a legal argument that never came, because the convoy commander never gave them one to argue against. There was no proclamation, no broadcast citing precedent. Just 9 hulls between the culling ships and the field, and a tone in that one-board voice that made arguing feel like a waste of fuel. I ran toward the ramps with the post's medkit still slung wrong across my shoulder, and the first thing I saw clearly through the ash was a line of Keltvaran laboris, easily 400 of them, plated hides grey with cinder dust, chitin cracked along the older one's joints, standing in the open with nowhere to run and nothing left to lose, watching 9 human ships settle onto a field that had never once, in 4 generations, seen anything arrive for their benefit. The processing crew came off the hospital ship before the ramps had finished lowering. Not soldiers. Medics, intake clerks, 2 engineers already running scan wands over the dome's failing scrubber stack like it was a problem they intended to solve on the way out the door. A woman with a clipboard and a translator bead reached the front of the labora line and said, in passable Keltvaran click speech, "Names. We are not taking numbers today. Names." The forelimb closest to her, an old foreman, plates yellowed with age, The kind of laborer who'd outlived 3 consortium overseers didn't move for a long moment. I think he was waiting for the part where it turned out to be a trick. "Severick," she said again, gently. "Whatever name you go by. We need it for the manifest, and then we need to get your young ones aboard before that jamming clears and the consortium remembers it has lawyers." He gave his name. She wrote it by hand, because the translator software kept choking on the click clusters, and I remember thinking that of every strange thing happening on that field, a human clerk handwriting an alien laborious name onto a paper manifest because the software wasn't good enough yet was somehow the strangest. The lines started moving. Not herded, walked, one family group at a time, intake clerks calling out medical priority the way you'd triage anyone. The old, the very young, the injured first. A consortium overseer drone, automated, came skimming low across the field broadcasting a cease and desist on a loop. One of the engineers shot it down without looking up from his scrubber readouts. Nobody on the convoy treated it as an incident worth mentioning. A second drone followed it within minutes, this one carrying a live consortium liaison feed instead of a recorded loop, a thin, irritated voice demanding to know under what authority Earth vessels were interfering with consortium property disposition. The clerk with the clipboard answered without breaking stride down the line. "Property doesn't have names," she said. "We are collecting names. Read your own manifest back to yourself sometime." The feed cut out. Nobody on the field reacted as if anything important had happened, which was, I was starting to understand, the entire point. I found work fast. Ash lung was everywhere among the older laborious, decades of breathing scrubber exhaust that should have been filtered and wasn't. I set up beside one of the hospital ship's intake medics, a broad, quiet man named O'Yelleran who didn't ask why a consortium surgeon was suddenly working triage for free, just handed me a second scanner and said, "Start with the ones who can't stand." We work through children first. That was the order, unspoken and absolute. Children, then elders, then everyone else. A Keltvaran child is small and soft-plated, easy to mistake for fragile, though I'd learn over the next hour they were tougher than they looked and twice as frightened as they led on. One girl couldn't have been more than a cycle past hatching by their reckoning, wouldn't let go of her mother's foreleg even to be carried up the ramp. O'Yelleran didn't pry her loose. He just picked up both of them together, mother included, and walked them up himself, talking the whole way in a low, steady voice about nothing in particular, the way you talk to calm something that doesn't understand your words but understands your tone. That was the first thing that told me this wasn't going to be the kind of rescue I'd seen consortium PR reels promise and never deliver. Nobody on that convoy treated efficiency as more important than gentleness. They had time for both. A second case came through that drove the point home harder. An elder laborer, plate so brittle with age they'd begun flaking at the joints, collapsed near the back of the line, ash lung gone to full arrest. O'Yelleran's scanner read the vitals and his face didn't change at all. He simply called for a stretcher team and started compressions on a chest cavity built nothing like a human one. Working from anatomy charts he must have stuttered on the flight in, because nobody briefs a medic on Keltvaran physiology unless they expect to need it. They got the elder breathing again 2 minutes later. Severick watched the whole thing from 4 meters away, forelimbs very still, and said nothing, but he didn't look away, either. The jamming cleared at the 90-minute mark, and the consortium came back on every channel at once. Threats, injunctions, a sudden offer to renegotiate labor terms that nobody on the field had asked for and nobody answered. In the middle of it, the consortium's regional director patched in personally, demanding to speak to whoever was in command of the convoy, insisting this was a sanctioned asset seizure and that Earth had no standing whatsoever in consortium-chartered space. I heard the whole exchange relayed through the hospital ship's open comm. The convoy commander let him finish. Then there was a pause just long enough to feel deliberate, and the reply, when it came, wasn't an argument at all. "You're right that this is your space," the voice said. "It's not your people. 412 individuals have already requested and received asylum. That request superseded your charter the moment it was made. You're welcome to file a grievance through the appropriate channel once one exists that we recognize." There wasn't one. Everybody on that field knew it, including, I suspect, the director. The convoy's lead ship answered for everyone after that, on an open frequency loud enough that even the laborious still queued on the ground could hear it translated through their bead relays. "Asylum has been granted," the voice said. 412 individuals. Confirmed. This matter is now closed. It wasn't a threat. It wasn't even raised. It was the voice of someone reading a fact into a record. the way you'd confirm a delivery had arrived. I looked back at the line, and Severick, the foreman, had stopped walking. He was looking up at the lead transport, not at the engineers, not at the medics, just at the ship itself, hull scorched from atmosphere entry, doing nothing more dramatic now than sitting on a dying field with its ramp down. I asked him, through the bead, why he'd stopped. He said the consortium had filed 40 years of paperwork on why the Keltverin didn't qualify as a protected labour class. He'd seen every revision. He'd memorized the language because the laborists had to know exactly what they weren't entitled to. 40 years, he said. And it took your ship 9 minutes to decide we mattered more than the file. I didn't have an answer for that. I don't think one was wanted. The last transport lifted with the dome's failing scrubber stack still venting behind it, 412 names on a handwritten manifest instead of a number on a cull report, and Cinder Hollow falling away below us the way every place falls away when you finally get to leave it, smaller, sadder, and somehow less real than it had felt an hour before. Severick found me near the hospital ship's aft viewport once the children had been settled and the worst of the Ashland cases had been stabilized. He didn't say much. The Keltverin aren't a species built for long speeches, and 4 generations of consortium service hadn't given him reason to trust that words changed anything. He'd brought the elder with him, the one O'Yelleran had brought back from arrest on the field, walking now under his own power, slow and careful, plate still grey with cinder dust nobody had gotten around to washing off yet. The elder looked at me the way you look at whether you didn't expect to survive, and said nothing at all, which somehow carried more weight than anything spoken could have. He pressed 2 of his forelimbs flat against the deck plating, plates down, in a gesture I never saw repeated and never found explained in any cultural brief afterward. Then he said 4 words in click speech that the translator bead rendered, imperfectly, as something close to, "The debt is recorded." I asked O'Yelleran later if that was a formal phrase, a treaty term, an old custom, something the consortium files might have buried somewhere. He said he didn't know, and that he wasn't sure it mattered. Some things get said once, mean everything, and were never meant to be filed. Cinder Hollow's dome went dark for good somewhere below us, its scrubber stack finally giving out, the last consortium asset of any value on that world reduced to a rights dispute nobody would ever bother settling. 9 ships' worth of fuel and time and medical supply had been spent on 412 names that had never shown up on a single profit projection, and not one person aboard that convoy seemed to think the math needed defending. I wrote it in my report anyway, badly translated and all, because some debts are worth recording even when nobody's ever going to collect.